with terrible, tragic consequences for the people involved. We believe that if the power of that sort of power, economic power, was more distributed to ordinary people, so they've all got their share of it and all got a direct stake in those firms, then it will be better. And I'm afraid free market forces, liberalism, leads to the accumulation of capital by small numbers of individuals, and they do use it to oppress other people, not deliberately, but that's an inevitable consequence of their actions.
Thank you. What role should the state have in the life of the people?
We believe that the state should have a limited role in affecting people. We believe far more responsibility for their lives, for their environment, should be taken directly by the people. And the role of the state really should be limited to providing a few very basic services, the supply of money, the supply of services such as electricity and water. It should be there to defend people, both at home in terms of a police force and abroad in terms of a defence capability. And beyond that, really, it should leave the British people to get on with their lives, to lead them in the way that they wish to do. And it should stop interfering. It's an unfortunate part of politics today that politicians seem to feel the need to keep having initiatives on particular problems. 9 times out of 10, it's simply them interfering in something they know little about. It would be far better off to just leave it to local people to determine themselves. So we would try and give far more power to local councils, and, wherever possible, directly to the people. Take away any form of local or national government at all, and let people decide for themselves. Education is a classic example. We would like to see local schools run by local people, and apart from perhaps laying down a very basic core curriculum, we would leave a lot of the other things as to what was taught and who was hired to local people to determine themselves.
Thank you. What arguments would you put against the idea that the individual has a fundamental right to do as he or she wishes, insofar as he violates nobody else's equal right to do the same?
Sorry, can we go back over that one?
Sure. Yeah.
Do you mind?
Yeah.
Because that's. Yeah, right, sorry. Okay. Within certain limits, we believe that the individual has the right to do whatever they want, as long as it doesn't affect other people. But there are limits to that, because a lot of actions do affect other people, even if it's indirectly. The right to accumulate large amounts of money, which I mentioned, by its nature, although it can be argued, why shouldn't people accumulate vast amounts of money? If they do, then maybe not they, but perhaps their children, when they inherit it, would then use it to oppress indirectly many other people. So I think there have to be rules within society to protect people. And almost any act by any individual affects somebody else. And therefore I think that there have to be these rules set down. We would try and keep them as low a level as possible, but simply change the structure. So that, for example, on the inheritance of wealth, we would make it impossible for vast fortunes to be transmitted down the generations, so that we almost end up with a feudal system of the Duke of Westminster owning large chunks of the City of London. It's absurd to think that he has any real right to that, and we would not go along with that, whereas many liberals would say, yes, he has an absolute right to pass on any wealth that he has now onto the next generation. So no, we would impose some restrictions on things like that.
What racial problems would you say are inherent in the application of classical liberal and libertarian ideas?
There's one obvious other problem, which of course in the National Front we're well aware of, in classical liberalism and libertarian ideas, which is that if it's taken to its logical conclusion, there should of course be no immigration controls whatsoever. Now, if we put that into action tomorrow, in this country, I suspect the day after our airports would be jammed by an influx of people wishing to come here. Now, liberalism would argue that over a period that would sort itself out. Well, yes, it would, but in the meantime Britain would become a most unpleasant place to live in. It would be even more crowded than it is now, and it wouldn't really be of benefit to anyone. So we believe that rules along the lines of the ones I mentioned, do have to be kept. And one of the rules of, obviously, that we're in favour of is complete control of immigration. Apart from anything else, we believe that the British people have the right to determine who lives in this country, and it's about time they were asked.
Thank you. In view of the fact that so many classical liberals were English or Scottish, and that many great British achievements occurred when the state played only minor roles in society, what would you say to the view that classical liberalism is the true British tradition?
It's been argued that classical liberalism is a true British tradition, but so are many other things that I think we will prefer to forget about. Scottish land clearances in the 18th century, child labour in the 19th century, they went along with classical liberalism, and many people would argue was an inevitable consequence of it. The British Empire, the ability to let people do whatever they wanted to do. You know, the British Empire wasn't created by the state, it was created by political and economic adventurers leaving these islands and taking over large chunks of the rest of the world. So I don't think that the argument about it being a great British tradition is something we should shout about too much. I think it's an unfortunate British tradition, and it's about time, along with certain others, such as taking over large chunks of the rest of the world, that we should get rid of. The British Empire did us no benefit. I don't think child labour did us much good, certainly didn't do any good for the children involved, and I think it's one tradition we would do well to get rid of.
In the sort of society advocated by libertarians, individuals would be free to racially discriminate against any group as employees, customers or residents, and to associate if they desire only with members of their own racial group. Would you regard this as a satisfactory solution to racial problems?
Some libertarians have argued that our views on race are really irrelevant. What should really be done is British people should simply be given the right to discriminate, to associate with whoever they like. I think you'll find that's what's happened in America, and the result, as we've seen fairly recently, has been the development of the ghetto system, whereby one part of a town is inhabited by black people, one part by Hispanics, one part by white people, and every few years there's a large explosion and we end up with the Los Angeles riot situation. It doesn't solve the problem, letting people do exactly what they want. The only real solution to the racial problems that are beginning to arise in this country and in other parts of the world is separation, simply keeping the races apart and letting them develop their own culture in their own ways in their own country. And most people are happier doing that. Most Asians in Britain identify with India or with Pakistan, most Africans with particular African countries, Nigeria and so on. It would be far better for them and for us if they were able to fully explore their cultural heritage in their own country, rather than trying to explore it in this country where it doesn't really work, and where there is a danger of ending up with a ghetto system and racial violence, which everyone deplores and which we certainly don't want to see in this country.
To what extent does your point of view share common intellectual roots with socialism?
The National Front's policies on economics do have some similarities with socialism, to the extent that we believe people have got basic economic rights. The right to enjoy a reasonable standard of living, the right to be looked after when they're sick or ill or unable to fend for themselves. But where we part company with socialism is that they believe these should be provided centrally by the state. There should be a centrally directed form of benefit structure, and also that the industries which provide the whole infrastructure for earnings within this country should also be centrally directed. Socialist politicians love to interfere in economic matters at all levels. They're forever calling for inquiries into this, inquiries into that, what's going to happen if this company does this, and so on. Whereas what we're saying is the politicians should really keep out of it. If you gave real economic power back to the British people, then most of these problems would go away in any case. And so we part company with socialism over that. But we do believe that people have got certain basic rights in this country, rights that have been built up over the generations by the hard work of previous generations, which have created what this country is today. And we think that as each generation goes past, those rights economic rights and the standard of living and so forth should increase.